Today, we're going to be installing the Thom Ayotte Camber Kit for the rear wheels. My car's lowered about 1.5 inches. It's got Tein Springs and Bilstien suspension, and I get a lot of wear on the inside tires, actually both the front and back. I have not yet found a front kit, but the rear kit we'll put on today. Here is the Thom Ayotte, probably pronouncing wrong, but the Thom Ayotte rear camber kit for a Gen 1 NSX. So the 4 parts at the very top of the screen, those are the tools to do the installation, and the other parts are the kit itself. Raise the car, remove the wheel. Notice that the lower A-frame is removed as well as some other components. It's because I'm changing out the half shaft because I have a ripped CV boot. Now that we have the wheel off, we need to remove the brake disc caliper in order to get to some components in back. Prior to removing the two 17mm caliper bolts, there is a dust cover that has 10mm bolts. Here is the dust cover. It is in this orientation here. So there's a 10mm bolt here and a 10mm bolt here. To remove the caliper, it is two 17mm bolts that are behind here. Next, we remove the brake protector or deflector. Next, we remove the cotter pin from the upper knuckle joint. Next, we remove the castle nut. It's a 17mm bolt. So now, with the castle nut off, the real bear of the project comes into play. Removing these ball joints is not easy. It is extremely difficult. So with the castle nut off, you need a 12mm by 125 nut. You do not want to use the castle nut because you'll wreck it. You want to get that on the ball joint to protect the threads. And then there are a bunch of different options, and it will depend on your level of desperation as you start this. I think the first place to start is probably with like a drift and a hammer. You can just kind of tap it and try to get it to pop out that way. But it's a tough angle with the hub here, so that doesn't usually work too well. Although I will say I was able to get one out that way. Another option is they have these ball joint tools. This one is the wrong size, but effectively what happens is this goes in here, would go in further if it fit, and then you torque down this bolt until it's pushing the pin out. So here's the tool, pop it in, torque the bolt down, and it would push this up. So that is another option. This one doesn't fit, so I can't try that. Then, if you get really desperate, I'm considering using an air hammer. So kind of getting this in here and tapping it real quick. And my thought process behind that is it's such a quick shock because all it does is need to break that little, whatever corrosion seal it kind of has, and everything will just pop out. But I've gotten one side out, and this one I'm still working on myself. This is day 2. I loaded it up with penetrating oil and let it sit overnight. I put some more oil in this morning, and now I'm home from work, and I'm going to give it another try. But this does seem like an area where you need some patience. So I am still working on the other side, but I wanted to show you the situation with the ball joint. So there's this item here, which is what goes under here. This goes like this. And as you tap it, this will drop down. So once this comes off, you get that out of the way. And then you're just continuing to tap it out. And it's really just in this area here. It doesn't look like it'd be a difficult fit, but it is. With the ball joints removed, now we need to remove 4 14mm, they're either nuts or bolts, we'll find out soon, So there's 2 over here and 2 over here. See these a little better. So these 2 nuts here. And, well, there's a nut here and a nut there. All right, so we have it. So here are both of our upper control arms. Interestingly, this side, this sleeve here with this collar and this piece here came out when we were removing this. On this side, this collar piece that is on goes on here, and this piece, which is on the underside of the knuckle, stayed in place. I don't think it particularly matters, but they did come out differently, so it's interesting to see, or maybe of interest to see, what the differences are depending upon how they come out. So we're at the point where we need to press out I don't know what you call these, but there's bushings in here. They're rubber, plastic, urethane, whatever they are. We have to press these out in order to move to our new camber kit. So again, this is the Thom Ayotte Camber Kit. It's the 2nd generation as I understand it. And I'm using the original instructions from way back. And we're gonna try to work to get these bushings pressed out. So effectively what you're doing is you're taking these pieces out here on either side, and we have a slightly different version here, which moves the upper control arm, forward or aft, which gives you more or less camber. So this particular kit I got, they sent me the tools as well. So we have this tool here, which is for the rounded edge. So the rounded edge one goes like so. So these are actually on the wrong side here. Swap these out. So this kit goes on here, and then this, which is the smaller diameter, goes here, and effectively we're pressing here and pressing that bushing out. On this side, there's a larger diameter bushing. Kind of a unique design, I don't know why, but it's a larger diameter bushing. And you see this big ring here. To get over that, we need a larger diameter pipe, and that's what this piece is here, which goes on the end there. This piece, for whatever reason, does not have these bulges, I guess you would call it. So this item will go here, and it will eventually push down, and then this will push through here. So now we need to get that done. I don't know how you would do this without a press, and fortunately my neighbor's awesome and he has a press. So now we're gonna try to give that a shot. Well, I mean, it's basically out now actually. So if I look at this, is that centered-ish? So if I look at this, I'm getting almost all the way there. So this is effectively out. So I think I'm just gonna tap this out. I was correct. There we go. Looks pretty good. And here is what you were removing. So it had a metal or aluminum sleeve around it, and it all kind of popped out real nice like. I actually would think you could actually get that back in. I'm not sure. I was told that you cannot, but I don't know. This doesn't look like it would be that bad to put back in. All right, we'll move on to the other side. Now we're moving to the larger diameter end, and we have 2 tools for that. I should state that these tools came when I purchased this, so they're on lend and or on loan, and I have to give them back when I'm done. So this is the larger diameter one. So this goes around this on the other side, and then this is the item that pushes it out because you don't need that notched item because it's a straight bolt section. So I'll set that up. There we go. All right. This is going better than I thought, actually. Okay, before we install the plastic bushings, it is important that we look at these mold lines. So my particular arm, there's some raised material here and some raised material on this side. We need to take care of that in advance because otherwise the plastic washer doesn't seat. You can check all four ends on the inside and the outside, but in general, it's really just the inside components or the inside portions of the control arms that have this issue. So here we have my cleaned up ends. So I'm trying to, again, I did this after the fact, so I have my other side in here, so it's going to be more difficult to clean out. But I took a file and I took a flat file on this side and just rounded that edge, and a round file on this side. And now I believe we're going to have a really nice edge to seat the bushing, bearing, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so I've cleaned this up a bit, and you'll notice that there are two ends. There is a larger end and a smaller end from a diameter perspective, so this guy's smaller than this guy. With the kit comes these larger diameter sleeves, and that's to make up the distance between this diameter and this diameter because we're using the same, I'll call them bushings, to replace or to go into these ends. So on the outside, so from this position, the outside, these go in here. Now you need to press them in. This one's going almost in anyway, but you do need to be careful because I believe, at least in the instructions, it says that this is slightly longer than this. Now, I don't see that when I look. So here's the other one. So it looks like it is actually not going to quite make it. It's possible that this being a newer kit, so this is the rebuild or remanufactured kit, through Rich, and who worked with Tom, by the way. So now we just need to get this in, and we want to make sure this is straight. We do not want to be on an angle. This even looks like it's a bit kinked that way, so we got to be careful with that. In my case, since it doesn't appear to be struggling at all to get in, I think I'm going to lightly tap it in with a hammer. Again, be very careful if you have the original kit, because if this sleeve is longer than this and we squish this down, it'll basically get to the end and then we'll be squashing only the spacer itself and wreck it. In my case, I'm pretty positive that this is not going to make it out the other side, but I'll still do this lightly just to be sure. Okay, so here are our bars. We're getting ready now to install two things. These sleeves, which go in either end of these, and then also this item here. So these, get the camera correct here, there we go. These unscrew eventually, and we take these and put them in. So I was correct on these outer items, so you can see in here that this particular version does not extend beyond. I assume that was a product improvement to make sure you don't crush that thing, because I suspect that happened a few times when people were trying to install, so this is probably a slightly better design. By the way, this piece is aluminum, machined aluminum and anodized. At least it looks like aluminum, maybe it's metal, some other metal. In any case, it's a metal piece. These items are, of course, metal also. These, however, are plastic. So I was very particular on the grease choice because I don't want any trouble with these. So here is the grease that the gentleman from AutoZone had suggested. The reason he went through trouble was he was concerned about, with plastic bushings, getting a grease that would not attack the plastic or slowly but surely attack the plastic. So he went with this. I don't know much about this other than what I'm reading on this can, but he was doing some online research when I was in the store, and this is what he came up with as the safest item to put for grease on these A-arms, or more on the plastic bushings than anything else. So the next step in this process is to take two of these collars for each of the four arm positions, and I guess you could say press these on. I don't think we're going to require a press, but I'm going to lubricate these some with my oil I got from Advanced Auto, and we're going to put these together. Although I'm greasing them lightly, I am greasing them completely to make sure there's no dry surfaces, because I want this to go as smooth as possible. In addition to that, I'm trying to make sure I don't have dirty hands or that you can see there's dirt on my work area here. So I've moved them out back there where it's a little bit cleaner, because you don't want dirt in here, because that'd be like having a CV joint with dirt in it. Now that all the sleeves are lubricated, we're gonna press them into the control arms. So it definitely takes some maneuvering. You really got to make sure it's going in square. So I'm having a little bit of a tough time with it. Okay, once you get it started, you can kind of realign it. So I've got it just started, but it's going in just a shy off. So now I'm going to realign it. And there we have it. So this one is ready for the other pieces. Before we put them in, we will re-clean out there in case I've gotten some dust or dirt in there. So the truth of it is that the plastic definitely has some ability to deform a little bit without being destroyed. So it's not as critical as the large aluminum inserts, which once you bend them, it's over. So I found that as long as you get it started a little bit, it seems to kind of settle itself, but just be really careful again about aligning them before you're pressing them in. Okay, so I reseated this area up here, and now it looks really good. So you would have seen that video before I had made the mistake, but others would have enjoyed it the way I did. So now that we're all set, we'll put on our final attachment point, and then we'll be good to put it on the car. All right, so the good news is you can't see my face and see the look of a defeated man. That's the good news. The bad news is I cannot get the driver's side arm on. The situation I'm running into is these holes are just a little bit too close. I need like an extra millimeter on either side, both sides. So I was able to get these in just barely, but in the process, I'm like eating into the side of the aluminum, which is kind of tough to video here. You can kind of see it in there. Yeah, there you go. So basically, I've got so much stress on the bolts because they're pressing against the insides or the outsides. So basically, the situation is I need to bring these holes in just a little bit. So the only thing I know to do is I'm going to try to oval these holes out a little bit, because I don't know what other options I really have. The stock ones are oval, so on one side for each of them they have oval holes this way. So that's going to be my plan. So here's our challenge. If you look at this side here, we are approximately in alignment for the holes, and it's somewhat visual, like an illusion, because these look like the OEM one is smaller, but it is actually pretty close to the same. But when I go to this side, these holes here are oblong, so they are oval a little bit. And that, I believe, is the source of our issue, because this larger knuckle or larger end is the one that we had difficulty with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mill out these here and here in order to give it a little bit more room, because I don't want it that tight on the bolts. Okay, so we're going to try to mill this out. I had put some plastic around, not plastic, some blue tape around here just to try to keep some of the metal shavings from getting in between the seals. I'll put one on that one later. I picked up a Dremel, and it's almost like a grouting tool, but I figure it's only aluminum and I'm only taking off like a millimeter or two, so we'll give that a shot, see how it goes. The good news is this tool is cutting very nicely, so I'm just going to go another millimeter or so on this side, and then we'll do the other sides. This one had made it on, but I think I'm going to just touch it up just a bit because it was pretty tight. And then I think we'll be good to go. So this is working out better than I thought. Okay, so I think I've done enough. So we got a pretty good amount of material removed on the inside of this, the inside of this, and I just touched this a little bit because this one was a little bit tough getting in, so I don't want to mess up too much, but we'll go with that and we'll leave this hole alone so it's got something to locate off that can't move. Okay, before we install in the car, we want to do one last final check. So with the control arm in running position, we want to ensure that the large end has these facing up and the small end has these facing down. So I'll check this one, large end facing up, small end facing down. That's good. Recheck this side, large end facing up, small end facing down. So now we know that we are ready for installation. By the way, when doing that, because I almost screwed this up, make sure you don't have it upside down because the ball joint obviously goes down. So check from that position. Now we install our upper control arms and all the bolts, the four that hold the ends here to the chassis are 60 Newton meters, as well as the castle bolt for the ball joint. Once we maneuver the arm around our hanging brake caliper, we should start by getting the ball joint in place and then raising the arms up to the correct location. At this point, we just want to get the ball joint seated, and then we'll get the other bolts loosely on the control arms. Be sure to hand thread in the bolts which hold the control arm to the chassis. It's only aluminum, so you do not want to strip those. I believe it would be best to put some Loctite on these, so we're going to be using the blue Loctite thread locker, obviously not the red. We want to get them out again. Now we'll torque down the bolts. They are all 60 Newton meters. So I can't get the torque wrench on the rear side bolt on the forward side of the control arm, so I'm just going to have to do it by hand. Same with the castle nut, which I wanted to be a little bit more careful about, but I don't have a setup small enough that I can get within here with a socket, so I'll be doing that by hand and rolling the dice a bit. So we got everything torqued down. We do not want to forget our cotter pin in the castle nut for the ball joint. So we'll install that now. With our control arms installed, we now move to putting the brake system back together. First thing we need to do is reinstall the brake protector shield, if you'll call it, and that's 4 10mm bolts. Next, we want to install the brake discs. Just make sure you clean them prior, brake cleaner and what have you. When installing the brake discs, try to get these holes in the same locations they were before. It should only go on one way, so it should be, well, it can go on many ways, but to line up these holes, it should only go on one way. Also make sure to spray down the hub. We want that as clean as possible too, so nothing's pushing back against that disc and keeping it so it is not flush or not seated. Now we need to put the brake caliper on. That will be a couple-step process. The first thing we need to do is remove the brake pads from the caliper. Then we can install the caliper over the disc, and then we'll move to the next step. With the brake pads out of the caliper, we now install the 17mm bolts to put the caliper on. We should use blue Loctite or thread locker for that. We will now remove both of the caliper bolts that hold the centerpiece on in order to be able to put the brake pads in. The caliper bolts are 14mm. Next, we want to make sure we lubricate the brake pad slide locations and then install the pads. The pad without the clip goes on the outside. Now just clean up any excess brake pad lubricating grease, and then we put the caliper over the brakes. It'll be a little bit of a struggle, but it'll make it. I should state now that if you are changing the brakes, a couple different things. First, you should check the brakes, make sure the brakes are okay. I got plenty of life on these, and they're the rears, so they should be fine. In addition to that, it's a little bit hard getting the brakes on if you're not changing the pads, unless you actually wind down the brakes like you do on any rear brakes. I'm going to just slip them over. I think it'll make it like it did on the other side that I've already done. Now it's probably a good time to just quickly clean up your caliper. Obviously mine I had painted, or I painted them, so I'm just going to clean them up a little quick and maybe do a little bit of touch up. Next we put on the, I guess you'd call it the caliper valve protector. So this item here, they do have a left and right on them, so this is the right hand side, and the orientation is like so, and there's two 10mm bolts. Make sure not to murder those bolts because they're only attaching the plastic. If you need a centering ring, don't forget to use it. And there we have it. We are ready to roll. So next step is to get in alignment, and then we should be good.